Very last session of the mobility track of this two-day symposium. We are at a tipping point, not just in how we power transport, but how we connect transport, energy, data, and policy into a seamless digital ecosystem. The electrical mobility transition will be defined as much by bytes as batteries. So our journey towards electric mobility transition is fast, but to truly scale, we need more than just chargers and vehicle. And that is essentially what we want to discuss or at least touch upon in this session. We are joined by 4 eminent panelists who have really tried and tested the waters of this industry. I'd like to invite the panelists on stage. Mr. Akhil Jayaprakash, co-founder, Pulse Energy. Ms. Ananya Das Banerjee, Associate Director, Institute of Transport Studies, UC Davis. Yes. Mr. Padmanabhan V, Group CTO, Charge Zone. And Mr. Mohammad Imran Khan, Vice President, Maruti Suzuki India Limited. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today. So while I've definitely called out all your names, it'll be great if you could briefly introduce yourselves for our audience. Thank you. We can start with you, Akhil.
My name is Akhil. I'm the founder at Pulse Energy. Think of us as a razor-pay gateway for EV charging. So wherever you want to go charge your electric vehicles, you can just use our platform to charge it. We cater to large fleet operators like Uber, Amazon. All their fleets essentially uses our platform to start and stop any charger. We use some of ChargeZone's network as well. So that's, in a nutshell, that's what we do.
Hello everyone, I'm Ananya. I head the India program for ITS UC Davis. We are essentially, you could say, work at the juncture of being an academician and also at think tank. We work on data-driven research for regulations on vehicle technology, on vehicle standards, vehicle utility, both on passenger and fleet mobility, and a little bit on the transport supply chain as well. So that's briefly.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. I'm Padmanabhan. I'm the group CTO for the Billion E group, who is in the energy transition. Primarily, the group has ChargeZone Private Limited, which is providing the DC fast charging. We are one of the biggest charging infra provider, having around 13,500 charge points across India and leading #1 with regard to the energy dispense through the charging stations. And there's one more vertical called Billion Mobility, where we deploy EV trucks. It's not a last mile delivery, it's for the mid-mile logistics, 55-tonner and 19-tonners and other things. And there is one more Billion E Energy, which is primarily supporting the charging stations with battery energy as a service base. So I'm there as a group CTO, so nice to get along here. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Hello, my name is Imran. I'm responsible for EV system and controls at Maruti Suzuki India Limited. So this is part of the engineering vertical in which the product is developed and designed. In my previous role, I was with Maruti in telematics domain, telematics data and user experience. So yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for
Thank you once again for joining us today. Akhil, so I'd like to start with you. Let's begin by framing what it actually takes, to build the digital backbone for EV transition. How can data integration strengthen, grid planning and enhance system efficiency, not just in tier 1 cities, but also in tier 2 cities, like if you were to look at it, because it is a growing market.
Yep. So think of, I'll just give you my background in terms of building protocols, right? I've been building protocols on the internet for about 15 years. HTTP2, WebSockets, Quick, all of this is something that I've worked on. Fundamentally, there are two things that come into play. One is the underlying protocol, especially when it comes to energy and grid planning. Two things to kind of get to that digital transformation that we all aspire for. One is the underlying protocol that every energy system has to speak the same protocol. Like that's something that has to happen. The good part is India is already doing it, which was very surprising for me as well, where I've seen the systems in the US and Europe, and I was surprised to see how quickly the Indian government agencies grasp of how critical it is to digitize our energy infrastructure. That was something that was really surprising for me, and they're encouraging it. So there's a initiative called India Energy Stack for you folks who want to go get information on it. It's essentially a single protocol for any energy systems. So if you have EV chargers, you have battery packs, you have buses with battery packs, you have solar panels on your rooftop. Anyone could now speak to each other and trade energy or do energy with whatever other ways of communication you want to. But that's the first checkbox, and India is already checking that. The second layer is what is getting built out now, which is ultimately the digital platform that gets built around it. So now if a DISCOM like BESCOM, we supply the software services for their EV chargers. So they call it the EV Mitra app. So any EV charger across Bangalore today, if you go and stop, especially run by BESCOM, it'll be run through our software. Now that we have that underlying protocol established, any of you can come in and build an application and start accessing that charger and pay for those chargers. So if you're running a fleet or you're working with Amazon, you don't have to necessarily download, a BESCOM's app to use it. So those are the two things, just to give you an example of the protocol, and then the second is the digital platform. So that digital layer has to be built by the consumers of that protocol. So DISCOM will be a consumer. So DISCOMs will end up building something of their own. Users like EV charging owners or EV charging users will also be consumers, and they'll also end up building platforms like that. So the way I think folks talk about this is the protocol is called the network, and then the platforms are the consumption side of it. So the network facilitates bi-party, multi-party communication, and energy is what is getting traded on it. And then actual consumption are platforms that become bigger. So yeah.
Thanks. A quick follow-up question. When you say that you've seen a lot of interest in our Indian, DISCOMs, do you also see any gap in terms of capacity? Because that's something that was raised in the previous session as well, that while there is interest generated, there is a huge gap in terms of capacity. Do you see that gap closing, or?
Energy capacity, you mean? Demand capacity?
No, capacity of our government organizations to pick this up and really push it forth.
Oh, that's market innovation at its best, right? So I think people have to just give this away for free. Because, see, we've got to understand how government work, right? Governments have to, they're ultimately getting paid with tax money from all of our pockets. So when that happens, they have to be judicious about where they're putting that money in. So if they have to now earmark certain things on a North Star that someone's painting for them, it's going to be tough. It's a tough sell. Like, why would they justify for a problem that would probably happen like 10 years or 5 years from now? It's difficult for them to justify that expenditure right now. So to answer your question of, is there an appetite or is there a capacity for them to do all of this? I think the answer is, as long as you find a champion in the government who says, okay, this is worthwhile pursuing, and you make the cost of that, setting that up as negligible as possible, you'll get things done. See, the way you got to think about this is, if a DISCOM digitizes their infra, everyone else in this market will start making a lot of money. Very simple. So the only thing that you need to do is just get the foot in the door and enable the DISCOM to digitize. If you can bring that cost of digitization to zero, anyone who's going to put up solar plant, like just to give you an example, like a solar rooftop today, when you set up a solar rooftop, the only thing that a customer thinks about is, oh, my house electricity is this much, Hence, I will put only this much amount of solar rooftop. If tomorrow they get to see a scenario where, you know what, if I just add in one more panel, I'll be able to make an extra $200 or $300 a month. That's a market in itself, yeah. Like, so much sunlight we get in South India, you probably get a lot of market out of it. So yeah, just my 2 cents on it.
Yeah, so essentially sell the fish, that's what you're seeing. Mr. Padmanabhan, I would like to come to you. Like the way that ChargeZone has now been expanding its network, how essentially has ChargeZone leveraged digital twins? Like how is that helping ChargeZone?
Yeah, maybe. I just tell you how critical it is, first of all. To start with, what we need is the uptime of the chargers, right? So digital twin is one part of it, and there are multiple technologies that could be adopted. But even before that, what we need to fundamentally understand is like what is the need for this. So all the charging stations, the fast chargers particularly, when you talk about 120 kilowatt hour fast charging stations, which is having 4 guns and other things, the uptime of the charging station is very, very essential because the investment goes in millions. Since that time, what is very important is how we are able to get all the charging stations digitally connected, how the informations do flow to the control tower, and how we make a sensible decision out of it. So one is it's just the part of getting data. The other thing is like what do we do with the data, right? So primarily there are a lot of things. See, for example, we could do certain amount of predictive maintenance. So we have seen one of the variables is the temperature, like when you monitor temperatures constantly, and there are certain set of parameters. I don't want to bore the audience on this. So if you monitor this, we could see a very clear pattern and we could predict when there would be maintenance. And the second advantage of this is that your customer is not disappointed because the infrastructure is not so densely populated today. So when a customer comes with almost edges of lower level of SOC, say around 18% or something like that, we can't tell him like, oh, abhi kaam nahi kar raha hai, or something like that. Maybe you wait for 1 hour, 2 hours, we can't tell you something like that. That is not possible. So we need to take care of the customer requirements. We should give him advance information. We should enable or disable the slot booking so that he is able to plan in advance. And there are multiple points that pushes us to get into a digital domain, right? So when you need to know what exactly is happening in your charging station, sitting across somewhere else, because the charging stations are not in a city. Normally, if you look at most of the charging stations, it's in the highway. So it's in a remote place. So it's not possible for me to have 2 engineers seated over there and maintain everything. So it is very, very important for us that we have proper technology identities over there so that we are able to operate it seamlessly for the benefit of the organization as well as for the benefit of the customer. So this digital twin is just one part of it. The primary focus over here is how do I get uninterrupted data, and more important is what do I do with the data. That's what is the critical thing over here.
So Bangalore, as we all know, is known as the city of pilots. But now that we're moving from pilot to proof of concept, something that, when you're talking about scale for that matter, it's inevitable that we try to understand what the, global frameworks are. So Ananya, my question is to you. So we've seen different ways of managing digital mobility ecosystems, like from public-private platforms, data trusts, or even open APIs. From your experience, what actually works, and what is it that we can probably adapt or look at adapting?
I think the first thing is working with such data incentive program for mobility as a sector is not new. So that's the good start to go with. The other thing is where there is a lot of scale, we do understand there are challenges. How do we accommodate and get those data? And also because the predictive analysis that we are going to give to our end user and utility service provider is as good as the data that will be generated, right? So that's where the open data access and everything that we could gather and how do we bring that to really address these problems would be the solution in general. So Google has a lot of APIs that they are developing, right, to crowdsource data that can be good into. Let's say this example of the charge point operators. It's not just about the discoverability, but also the access, the payment gateway, whether it's functioning or not, whether it can give me a route, based on where am I destined to, if this is the optimum route or not, and whether this information can also be built into this network so that it can pass on to other users in this network. I think this is the only way that we can pass on real-time information and also optimize the entire set of stakeholders who need to take advantage of this system that we are building in. That could be the start point, yeah, definitely. Just to add one more point, the user network, the micro-mobility, whether it's Uber, Ola, or other vehicle aggregator platform, one point that they rely on is reliability of operating. I think this is what is missing in whenever we are talking about high mileage, smaller vehicles that are driving into the system. Unless this reliability network gets strengthened up, we will not see adoption at a scale when you're talking about transition.
Okay. Mr. Imran, it's not just us getting smarter, but it's also the vehicles that are getting smarter. So now with more connected vehicles, so how do you think that role comes out for OEMs? From an OEM standpoint, how can connected vehicle data and public charging infrastructure come together to actually create a seamless ecosystem which is also very user-friendly?
Also, I'll take that user friendliness first. So we have to be very focused on the user. So let's talk about the user. EV user in day-to-day usage of the EV is normally drawing the charge from home because that's the cheapest and can avoid public charger. But yeah, there are days in which user will be looking for public charger, especially on the long journeys in which he'll run out of the charge. So vehicle systems per se are meant for serving the EV user, and it has to get married to the public charging infrastructure information so that the user is able to plan the journey. So planning of the journey is one need for which needs to be served from user experience point of view. The second is the predictability in getting the charge. If you look at today's situation, the user is actually using multiple apps and trying to get the subscription or load the money to charge the vehicles. Whereas the ideal user experience is that he or she should go to one single app and being able to do all of these requirements, meet all of these requirements. Now, how this can be done is one way is that you marry the vehicle information with the charger availability and allow the user to plan the journey, put the stop on en route where the user may have time. Also, in day-to-day usage in the city, the user is always looking for a reliable place to charge and be able to pay easily. So there are protocols which, as a standard vehicle has to adhere to, and there are protocols in which vehicle is talking to a charger is talking to a cloud system on OCPP, and then there is cloud-to-cloud communication also, which comes into play, in which the OEM can integrate all the public charging information. So that's the journey I think all OEMs will take, and that should enable and solve a lot of problems that we see today.
Follow-up question on that. Where do you see the barriers falling, like into which category? Do you think it's technical, or do you think it's an institutional barrier that as OEMs you will have to figure a way out to solve when you're looking at scaling up?
Yeah, that's a good question. When you talk about scaling up and solving all problems, there are technical barriers. Vehicle is a mobile device. It has to be there. It can be there any nook and cranny of the country. So there has to be systems which should work, offline. Not everything can work online because connectivity breaks sometimes. So there has to be built-in redundancy. So you have to solve those technical issues on the spot. Also, there has to be some systems which should look at the holistic picture of being able to serve the customer in all ways. when somebody like a EV user, largely there are two-wheelers today, but cars population is going to grow. That is also going to present additional challenge that the sheer number of vehicles will start charging suddenly together, and there has to be some load management in the backend where several stakeholders have to play a role and solve those problems. In addition to that, I think there is business problem as well at hand. There is a lot of collaboration which is needed between charge point operators, between OEMs, and there are other players, mobility stakeholders, map companies, who have to collaborate together to solve these issues.
So you talked about grid load as well, with the growing population. So I'd like to come back to you, Akhil. So we know that digital tools can help balance charging demand and grid load as well. But what is the primary barrier? Like, why aren't we able to really, go all out?
So I'll take what Imran just said, right? And I'll add to sort of the way I see scale happening. And this is primarily because I've spent considerable amount of time working with Pramod sir and Nandan sir and kind of understanding how they think about building architectures. In India or across the globe, whenever you think about tech to be built, you have to think about how it scales to a billion user population. So when we started this business, I had one thing that is written on a glass, my window at that point, was that if our mission should be to enable charging in every single UPI app. See, today when you walk into a showroom and ask for an EV car, first is car specs, everything is great. Second question that the sales guy gets is, where do I charge this? Now, typical answer is, sir, ये 15 amp का socket पे भी चले जाएगा, like a 15 amp socket also, it works, so plug it in. Now, this works at a four-wheeler scenario. Most of the population lives in a rental apartment. You have to get the right approvals to get like a socket set up there. You might probably have a 1 year or 2 year lease. Don't know why you want to invest that much amount of money. This becomes worse for a two-wheeler, three-wheeler guy. A two-wheeler who's a gig worker, if they go buy a two-wheeler vehicle and the answer is 15 amp ka socket mein chale jayega, they live in a PG where the PG guy won't even allow that two-wheeler to be parked downstairs because it's an EV, right? So this thing is, you have to think about how do you frame this from a marketing and a UX point of view. I always say that if that sales guy can tomorrow come in and say, sir, कोई भी ऐप आप पकड़ लो, कोई भी UPI ऐप में, उसमें आपको चार्जिंग मिल जाएगा. That should be the answer. That's the first mission that I have as a business to get that done. Second mission is, now once the user is in the UPI app and understands that I can source energy, I can find where the nearest charger is, I'm on this route, I'm on this highway, I want to see where's the nearest charger. Now that becomes built into the human that, okay, this is a normal thing, like how we do when we go to a auto rickshaw or a chai shop and we say UPI hai, it becomes as trivial as that. That's when this gets boring. The second phase of this is, to answer your question, how does this work with the grid? See, again, Imran said points about, there could be scenarios where grid gets overloaded, people are coming in, grid doesn't have any understanding. Now imagine a scenario that you're using a UPI app and the grid now messages everyone saying, if anyone decides to just increase their air conditioning temperature by 1 degree, I will incentivize your electricity bill the next month. Let's assume that's a message that comes as a notification into your favorite UPI app. You'll be like, हाँ, मैं opt-in कर देता हूँ. Right? It's just a click of a button. Behind the scenes, whichever your manufacturer is, for air conditioner, they might go ahead and just raise it. Oh, I got the consent from the user. It's this air conditioner. Let me just go ahead and enable this. This works in Europe. Like, these are things that work. Like in Europe, I was just talking to someone today, right before this session. We're talking about demand response, right? In Europe, there are countries where if you have a washing machine, you just put your clothes in, put the detergent, close it and keep it. There's a system that speaks with the grid, figures out what time this should start spinning. This will happen. It's a matter of time, but it'll happen in phases. So to close up on the question thing, Our mission is going to be focused on getting this into UPI apps. It will happen. The second phase of this would be we should make energy as tradable as possible, as an asset that you would trade like money comes into UPI apps. And it can be that, you might just say, okay, I have my own charger, I'll plug my vehicle in, but let the application decide when to start. And that application will automatically speak with the DISCOM. Like it'll speak with BESCOM and say, okay, BESCOM, like literally, you as a consumer is just subscribing to it, and that application is now speaking to the DISCOM through this network that I spoke about earlier, and saying, hey, I have like 500 users who have plugged in vehicles who's willing to not consume energy during these hours. How much money would you give? Done. That's we should live in that world. That's a much more fun world to live in. But the underlying, just to give you that full context, network has to get built. Network is getting built. It'll start with EV chargers. Grid comes in later. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that response. So when we look at the data that's being generated, that's a lot of data with a lot of public value as well. Ananya, so my question is to you. How can governments or your prior experience of any other case study that you would like to highlight, where they've really cracked the code of ensuring that there is access, but there is security of the public value at stake as well? So any examples that you would like to cite?
First and foremost, I think no one has cracked it yet. It's a process, right? I think that's also the beauty of digital integrated system, and now we are also talking about AI, right? The idea is whenever we deal with the first problem, that's essentially a first step, and we need to iterate and get to where we want to get to. The other thing I would say is, in general, what we have, only recently this has changed, but in general, we were celebrating just having data, But just having data is nothing to be celebrated unless we are using this data to really inform or address the problem that we really want to address or solve. So how do we integrate that? And I think you mentioned a very good point about the DISCOMs, and that has been our experience as well. DISCOMs have data till the last second. And this is very integrated data, but this data is not publicly available to the network, charging network, or even us as users or the bus corporations. Again, if DISCOM themselves have to make this data public, they are going to, a lot of capital investment might be required. So do we have a breach to that? What are the other methods through which we would want to hedge this so that DISCOM is able to share this, but they are also going to benefit something because they also have to run, right? I think that's where somewhere we don't have it, but government might step in to build such enabling systems that not just create regulations, but also help businesses do their businesses. Problems meet their ends, and profitability also keeps rising. So I think this thing has to come together. And it's no part of the world has really cracked it in that sense, but everyone is experimenting, yeah.
Just to follow up on that, when you talk about data, like you mentioned that there is data, abundant data available, and that's not the primary. I mean, how do you use it? But also just wanted to understand, are there standardizations in place for data, and how good are they? Does that need work? Is that an area where there is work involved, or we are good to go?
To an extent, yes, and to an extent, no. Because if we talk about the transport supply chain from till the user end, there are multiple parts to it. Now, there are portions, for example, let's say passenger mobility or bus system. The data is more or less integrated. We know what are the KPIs to look for. But at the same time, when we look at the similar vehicle category, which is the heavy duty vehicle, we don't have harmonization of what are the KPIs that we are going to look across the infrastructure ecosystem. Similarly, now if we talk about the smaller vehicles, which are a huge, about 70–80% of the vehicles that's moving on road, we don't have that integration, and we don't have that, what are the data points that is going to keep generating on its own. This is one point. Even in the supply chain, when we are talking about building, about the OEMs and battery OEMs and other components that get into the system, each and every components does have a number which is kind of the nomenclature assigned. Even that is not integrated to the extent that it should be. Then there is another part, a vehicle, after the vehicle life, what do you do with this vehicle? You need to recycle. We do know it gets scrapped and there are two generic rules, but even today, the recycling agencies do face issues because each and every component which goes into toxic component, which goes into recycling, the values and everything are not synchronized. So all those synchronization level at each and, these are smaller things, but with larger impact because there is scale. So that needs to be done. Unless that's done, we'll unable be able to reap benefit from the system. Even if we generate the data, we won't know what to do with it because it's different mode, different systems, and different units.
Thank you. Mr. Padmanabhan, back to you. So what are, according to your experiences, your insights that you have, being part of the industry for a while now, what are the systemic bottlenecks that you think need prioritization?
Bottlenecks in?
Scaling up.
Yeah, I think.
Again, so the whole policy, or is it technology, and how, what's your priority here?
Yeah, I think primarily it is boiling down to what sort of data we get and how do we use the data to scale it up. Say, for example, like every charging stations across can give a data of start time, end time, what is the amount of energy that has been pumped, right? In which route, in where it is. And there are multiple information that comes in with regard to number of vehicle availability, from traffic data, from A, B, C, D. There could be a very clear demand planning that could be done. There could be very clear maintenance schedules could be published in advance, right? So when you talk about scaling up, it's altogether a different ball game. So because today we have few stations, few vehicles over here and there, and sorry, I mean, I'm not eliminating the number of two-wheelers and other things. When you look at much bigger vehicles, which at a charge takes around 200 kilowatt hour or 300 kilowatt hours of energy, right? Unlike the passenger cars, which take some 15, 20 kilowatts hour, right? And then the scaling up means in terms of the number of vehicles as well as the quantum of charge that you could dispense, right? That is the real scale up. That is altogether a different ball game. Then comes what sort of infrastructure that we need to have, what sort of land parcels we need to have, and where we need to give a license, right? So if we are going to have some two stations over here and next 200 kilometers going to be a dry area, there is no use, right? So primarily the policy should be the energy availability from different discoms on priority lanes or with better mix of renewable energies, what we call RE mix, and how we make RE available, and then how do we motivate. Like I get back to Akhil's point, right? We have a good amount of solar energy in India. Can we try to incentivize the time of solar energy available? Because the solar energy is not available at 12 o'clock for you. Of course, you can make it available with the battery backups and other things, but it's going to cost additional money. You lose the advantage of the cost. Can we use these sort of things? How do we bring a policy framework so that the amount of energy that is available for you is dispensable, and how we could do that, and what point of time, how much data needs to be done, and how is the some of the licensing things, and with regard to transformers and the fees that we pay. There are a lot more of things that need to work in tandem. And then comes to the data points and how we use the data point. I think it's not that blindly we move on. We take with all the, every quarter we could just see what is the vehicle population, what is the energy dispense today, and then how it grows. So we can easily bring a predictive algorithm which decides the infrastructure planning in term, the power planning, discom plannings, upgradations, maintenance. Everything comes from there. That's the way I'd look at for scaling up. The policy need to be sort of like mix of all.
Okay, thank you. Imran, my question to you now is, when we look ahead, what can an OEM do to ensure that you're doing ethical and responsible data sharing, as these ecosystems mature, but also in a way to enable innovation as well? So, what's your framework for this?
Yeah, so I think what is important is that you need to be very, very transparent with the data owner. So if a customer is using a car and producing data or any other data set which is there, you have to transparently inform and take the consent that the data is being collected for a specific purpose that has to be mentioned, and then comply to that commitment. It has to be governed under the law and with DPDP in place. I think companies are all building solutions to ensure that each and every byte which is collected is ensured from the consent point of view. After that, once it is there, there are provisions that you can use anonymization to sort of de-link the PII or remove the PII, and then it can be, there are multiple solutions, of course. Removal of PII and anonymization is one part of it. The other is standardize that data in some form so that it can be used by larger community and can be used by anyone. Also, building systems in-house. Building all stakeholders have to come together to actually look at what are the data sets which is required, and then building the systems which can easily allow that innovation to happen. Something like clean room in which you have sanitized data set available, some sample set, and you throw a problem to it and try and solve the problem with the data. Over a period of time, I think a lot of awareness has happened across the country, and I'm quite optimistic that data will be used beyond the specified purpose after anonymization, after using it for the set purpose. Yeah, thank you.
So you touched upon transparency. So question to Ananya as a follow-up to that. Can institutional mechanisms play a role in ensuring transparency and clean transfer of data? Like, maybe having a digital regulator or an interoperability councils. Do you think that makes sense? Do you think there is a need for a mechanism to really step in to ensure that, the data is safely transmitted and also there is no, leakages?
Yeah, I'll give an example, maybe from the fleet sector, where the heavy-duty fleet sector. So fleet sector, the cost of accounting for this is by payload, and about 70% of these heavy-duty trucks that goes one way, 70% or more, these don't return with the same amount of volume that they went in the first OD. And now this, which essentially means is revenue losses, right? They also have additional revenue losses in loading, unloading, tolls, and multiple other things, resting periods and all. Now, when we were talking about EV transition in this segment, we were talking about a clean transition from a grid and energy perspective. But what the fleeters or the fleet owners, what they see it as a revenue loss, right? So what is the gap here? Essentially, it's an information gap. There might be load available, but who is matching this load with this empty payload that's going to come, right? So there is a need, definitely, and a council or something of that sort. But again, we do need to take accountability, even if that council is from, even if it's semi-government. Obviously, it has to have other stakeholders. It has to have fleet association. It has to have government. It has to have OEMs, partly. But this information, if we could transfer in real time and do a matchmaking, that will really be problem solving. It will reduce time. It will increase revenue. It will increase more reliability of this ecosystem to have more faith in transition, and also help in the energy provider ecosystem to create and invest in public charging infrastructure and other things. So yes, like if we have this, it's going to solve. How we have it is definitely a question, and we do need regulation, standards, accountability. Without that, this data can go anywhere and mismanage.
So accountability is key here for sure. We do want to wrap up on time because, so this will be my last question. Akhil, what kind of data governance or a platform model should startups and discoms collaborate on effectively?
That's a very tough question. So, I think, see, existing DPDP Acts, anyways, sort of protects private personal information. So the way in my head, at least in Pulse, the way we kind of think about data is there is personal private information, which I can identify back to the user. Any metadata that's pertaining to that, that's PII data. The second level of data is aggregated data. At an aggregate level, what does that information look like? It does not involve Akhil did this charging. It involves this much amount of charging happened today, right? So aggregated data and then PII data. That's the two kinds of information that I look at. Then there is grievance data. So think of this as, hey, there is an issue that has happened, and it's possibly on another charger from our customer. I only pass on parameters that are necessary for them as an infrastructure provider to debug. So that's your second level of, like the third level of data. So personal data, aggregated data, and grievance data. These are three frameworks that we, at least in the company, use. Now, when you look at a question like yours, right, which is how do startups, discoms, everyone come to the same consensus? I think this has to be part of the network building format, right? So this whole initiative around India Energy Stack and Unified Energy Interface, those initiatives will have those questions come up. It is the regulators and the policymakers who has to come in and say, okay, this is not a data that you could leverage. Like for example, account aggregator. That's personal information, it's banking information, but they have built a framework that allows NBFCs and certain entities to access that information with your consent, of course, right? So there is always that I would leave it up to the policy to go define that, or a group who comes together to define it, because it's going to be very circumstantial on the use cases that they're looking at building out. So my answer to your question would be, let the team who has come together to build India Energy Stack or the team that is building Unified Energy Interface, let them go figure it out, because that's anyways a consortium of startups, discoms, a lot of the companies. They will figure that out in some format. I don't think I'll do justice if I give you that this is what we should do. So yeah.
Okay. Mr. Padmanabhan, I'll come back to you. What is your closing remark? Where do you see us heading as a country at a national level? What sort of digital platform do you see for our charging infrastructure?
Yeah, I mean, it's just not only limited to charging infra. So I would say when you talk about data, openness to share the data, because you can't do anything with the data. Like, say, for example, since Imran San is also there, I take the advantage of talking together on this topic. If OEM has a certain amount of data, they're keeping that alone is not going to help them. At the same time, the CPOs having data among themselves is not going to help them, right? There should be an openness to share the data. And only by sharing, we get more insights into what's happening and where it is happening and other things. If not, it is not going to do that. Then second thing is, everybody talks about data, but no one understands like what is the depth of data we need based on what is the outcome. So there need to be certain amount of clear thought process need to be there. Road data is not just only the altitude, right? Is it the gravel type? Is it concrete roads? Is it A, B, C? Everything needs to come. At times I hear some funny conversations saying that, yeah, we have a complete road data of India. No, it's not that complete road data of India what you have, because we have more than 300 types of humps, right? So ground clearance, I think Imran San will understand. We have some fun. Like in India, we can't have proper ground clearance because we don't know who's putting the speed hump. These are all the data what is required. You can't do without that, because this ground clearance also influences your energy efficiency, right? So it's all boils down to each other. So we could scale up with more data sharing There is no fun in everybody trying to keep the data. I completely agree with Akhil that it need not be Padmanabhan's data or his data or her data or something like that. It could be anonymized and the data should be made available. I mean, maybe all know that our neighboring country has much more ahead of us in the data sense. They can be at least around 20 to 30 years ahead of us, primarily because all the firms, all the one has to openly share the defined data to the public. So there is a quality data available, so good algorithms can be built. So there could be a good demand prediction. Back to my topic, there could be a good demand prediction. There could be a right place where we could install the infrastructures, provide the energy, provide the power, and also do the things. I think that's the way we need to go. It all boils down to how we start waking up on how do I come out and say, okay, guys, I will share this data. It starts from there.
Okay, so you touched upon an interesting point about, willingness to share data. Now, all three of you are on the side of, people who are using the data that's shared. So, Imran sir, a follow-up question to you. How open are OEMs to sharing data?
Well, so stakeholders have to come together, identify the use case. There has to be some pilot, and we have to build some success stories, and that will open up. I'll give you one example. Let's say you have to plan the charging infrastructure. So charging infrastructure has to come up at a place where vehicles are dwelling, and that dwell time is, let's say, more than half an hour. And these are the hotspots which need to be identified, and that needs to be published, or let's say there has to be a gap which has to be communicated. So that's something which a CPO can pick up, and aggregators can pick up and work upon it. That will solve problems. Similarly, in real time, there are issues which EV owners may face, not being able to charge. That's information. Similarly, a lot of other parameters. In the entire ecosystem, I think players have to understand that there is win-win. I think this was being discussed in the previous panel discussion as well, that people have to realize that there is a win-win situation. And that win-win has to come, there has to be a systematic method to actually discover the use cases or discover those win-win situations where there'll be a mutual agreement to actually share data. And a body like CDPG or SIAM for that matter, because in SIAM all auto industry meets, has to galvanize this kind of discussion. I think that will play out in long term, and I think problems will get solved over a period of time. It's just that how data will play a role and how smooth that user experience that can come from data is something which I'd also like to touch upon vehicles, electric vehicles in particular. Half of the cost of the vehicle is battery, and battery is an asset. It has long life today thanks to the technology, but it also has second life. And when you're trying to use the battery and recycle it or use it for second life, the traces of how where the battery cells came from, how it was used during its lifetime is an information which stakeholders who are owning that battery would need when there is a handshake happening. So such use cases will also propel the need for being able to standardize the data. And thanks to government, I think I heard that the battery passport, which is a standard in Europe, it is implemented, is being looked at seriously by Government of India as well, and that will enable such data exchange in standardized formats.
Thank you so much. That was a well wrapped up answer. So, looking at the number of audience, I don't think we'll have a lot of questions, but if you do, please just state your name and the organization and to whom is your question addressed. Can somebody help with the mic?
Yeah, sorry, actually the audience has dwindled. That's because we are split between 4 sessions, and also I think this is the last one. So So I'm Raghu from CDPG. I had a question. I'm just wondering if we are putting the cart before the horse when it comes to EVs in India, because we still have huge problems with just power supply. And at least where I live, it's not very far from the city. It's just near the airport. But it's considered a rural area, and every day we don't have power for at least 4 hours. And so it's very difficult to charge a vehicle if you are trying to go somewhere in a hurry and you're out of charge. Many times I've had to take my petrol vehicle just because, and also the charging time is pretty long. I mean, for most vehicles in India, it takes even a fast charger takes 3 to 4 hours. So something like this is pretty much out of the question to charge on the way to some place unless your range is sufficient to reach the destination. I don't think you can plan any trips because a 4-hour break or 5-hour break is not realistic. So what do you think of that? That is.
Maybe I take the question, coming with CPO background. There are a few things. One is with regard to the charging time, right? And the fast charging doesn't need 4 hours time. Say, for example, a group company of ours, Billion Mobility, is deploying 55-tonner EV truck with 304 kilowatt-hour battery pack, right? I understand. I mean, like, the technologies keep changing. Sorry, I couldn't get you.
Cars that most people own, right, they cannot charge that fast.
No, I mean, it's not meant for the charging at home. So when you go to any charging station where there is a DC fast chargers are available, right? So based on the battery kilowatt-hour capacity, I'm just talking about even a 300 kilowatt-hour with close to 2 guns of 120 kilowatt-hour. So you could charge at 240 kilowatts in 1 hour, right? So easily around 20 to 30 minutes is the charging time what would be needed if you identify the right charging station, right? That is point number one. Point number two, with regard to the power shutdowns, yeah, we do have this problem, and that's something that what we are trying to do is like we are also trying to support these charging stations with the battery energy backup. So one of our charging stations near Krishnagiri is having close to around 1.2 megawatt hour of battery backup. It's just something like 1,000 times of that our UPS what we have at our home. So we have 1.2 megawatt hour of battery backup. And this is feasible, it's technically possible. The question is, what is my footfall to the charging station, right? How much energy I dispense, and it also makes some amount of economic viability. It's a chicken and egg story, sir. So you say that I have this problem, so I'm not going over there, and you say you are not coming there, I'm not giving you this, is not going to end. But it's moving away, and gradually it is fading out. I think soon we would not have this issue in the days to come.
I'll just, if you don't mind, I'll just give you another perspective in this whole thing, right? See, your problem is 4 hours of power loss, right? You rest of the hours you're getting it from a central. BESCOM is giving you supply. If we imagine a world where there's a network where people can trade energy, we'll give the DISCOM also their due of money. You stay in a population, in an area where there's, let's say, 100 houses, 200 houses, right? If that 4 hours, if 100 people are going to consume energy, I look at it as an economic opportunity. I would go set up solar there and do that. If this network existed, I'm saying, like, so if the way you got to think about, I don't have a solution to your, I don't have a solution to your problem. I'm saying, I'm giving you an answer of, this exists in millions of places across this country. See, today, energy distribution and generation is always centralized. There's a central entity doing this. If we as a country need to be energy independent, it has to be decentralized. Every single person should be able to think about it. Acha, there is no electricity in this village. Can I be the DISCOM here? Can I go do like his energy battery packs? I can go purchase battery packs from him. 4 hours. DISCOMs, because that 4 hours of load shedding or whatever that is happening, what DISCOM rate is what, 8 rupees per unit? Let's say I'll charge 12 rupees per unit. You'll pay for that 12 rupees. You're like, okay, 4 hours here, 2 rupees, 4 rupees extra, I'll pay. But I will get consistent amount of power. That's good enough margins for me. And 2 rupees is what my amortized cost of setting up solar with battery packs. Let's assume 4. You're one of the best businesses out there. Yeah? You're setting up a solar and a pack, and you have people who will consume it. Simple as that. Hospitals in that area will purchase it. Commercial tariff laga lo. You can sell it to hospitals and workspaces there and say, boss, you run it, I'll charge you $20. Like, so the way you got to think about this is there's networks that is getting set up or protocols that will get set up in open networks that will enable this kind of economic activity. But yeah, that's my 2 cents into this.
Yeah, I'm Sheshadri from Aditya Birla Group. My question is to Mr. Imran from Maruti Suzuki. Maruti Suzuki is still into IC engines and not into EV vehicles, whereas others like Mahindra, Tatas, and even MG, Morris Garages, have already started. Have you made any data comparison of lithium getting imported from China mostly, and also about this fossil fuels being imported from Middle East and Russia, that cost comparison for our foreign exchange outgo?
Well, so I'm not the expert in supply chain, but yeah, I think the answer lies somewhere in. There are 2 things to it. One is forex, how much you are depending on one source versus another. The other is the total environment cost. When you're doing this in India, I remember 10 years back when first FAME policy was being launched in the country to promote hybrid and electric vehicles. There was a debate about, we are talking about bringing hybrid and electric vehicles, but eventually it is going to shift from fossil fuel to another dependency where countries like China and many sources the supply chain will lead to one or 2 specific countries, and we may end up relying from one source to another. But if you look at the future, you have to diversify. You have to look at all possible options on the table, and identify which is going to win in long term, and put hedge against one against the other. Also, you have to look at the second part of it, which I spoke, is the total environment damage, or let's say you have certain targets to meet in that direction. So you compare in that terms as well. You don't just look at in terms of money or forex. You have to look at the overall supply chain issue plus the environment.
I can maybe add to the supply chain point. So to make batteries, about 90% resources of the world that currently is mined goes to China, and that gets refined, and these batteries, China currently holds 95% of the production. So that's the reason, not just us, even in the developed world, they are dependent on China because they don't have a secondary choice at the moment. However, in the recent years, there have been other mineral deposits, lithium deposits that has been discovered, which has not been yet brought up to the refining grade, which goes into batteries. But this is about one third of the volume, estimated volume that's going to come up. So the current strategy for diversifying is not just going and getting it from there, because that's not as easy as it's saying, but it's to gather the global south consensus so that you can aggregate demand and build the supply chain, which can kind of then bring scale, and only scale can be the reroute the supply chain. That's the long short answer. And for India, like we have recently done an estimation, about 60 to 70% of lithium demand in 20-30 years could come from the emerging EVs that is going to come. But now the question is, how do we develop this recycling ecosystem as well?
One question, can I ask?
Yeah, sure.
Hi, I'm Harika from Climate Collective. This is for all the panelists. Where do you see the startups operating in the retrofitment fit in, even in the near future or in the long term? Do you think they have future, or will they be dominated by the OEMs who manufacture the new EVs? Can there be a temporary fix even from a platform perspective?
You can, I think companies, there's always an opportunity in retrofitment. In trucks, there is a large opportunity. Like if anyone is looking at a space in retrofitment, trucks is a segment. I keep talking to people who want trucks, like large heavy duty trucks. They want separate retrofitments in there. And in fact, one of the ones that are running and actually making sense from a cost point of view is a retro. It is not an actual built vehicle, first life. It's a second life retrofitted vehicle that's coming in. I don't know about the two-wheeler, three-wheelers. I don't know what the ROI is there, but there's Race Energy, I've heard, as a company who does retrofitments. I think Sun Mobility also does retrofitments. So massive opportunity there. Yeah, like you should not stop back from it. You should just keep at it. That's my 2 cents.
But is there an existing infrastructure supporting it enough for it to scale? Because we are talking about accelerating the transition. So
Yeah.
even for trucks, again, there will be safety issues, or just convincing the demographic that retrofitment is actually beneficial. So
Buy the kit from e-mobility, you know? But he will sell that to you. So he has everything ready-made. So there are companies in this country who will provide the support and the scale. So you're talking about scale. Let's assume that you want a truck from Chennai to Bangalore. He has everything that is needed for that truck and for the power as well, like as in charging infrastructure. He'll go figure it out because ultimately his business is that. So the way you got to look at this question is, if you're looking at retrofitment as a category, it's a large enough category to make money. Charging, and in two-wheelers, I think it's going to be swapping. You will have to do some tie-ups and get it. You'll have to do some planning around it, and that will be the smartness out of it, right? Like, you're not going to start a retrofitment company just out of the blue. You're going to think about, okay, I've started this business. I'll target that, like Exponent did. Exponent is pure retrofitment. But they have more Exponent charging pumps than CNG pumps now in Bangalore. And they're doing great. So now they're putting that into buses as well. So I don't think scale, like when you start building these things, you'll automatically start planning for scale. So don't worry about it. No,
So on retrofitment, there are companies who have kind of cracked the cost economics, but the challenge is not the cost economics, the challenge is the regulation. Because for these heavy vehicles, when they do retrofit, it's a big cost. It can go up to 60% of original cost of that second use vehicle. Some companies have cracked it. It can be recovered in 3 to 4 years. So recovery could happen, but for bigger vehicles, their life cycle is also 4 year, or 5 year, 4 year, because trucks, not a single user uses truck for its entire lifetime. They change after 4 years. That's the gap. That's the general running cycle. Within that, if something happens to that vehicle, who will take the onus of that? OEMs are not going to take, right? And retrofitters, they cannot give warranty. I think that's the challenge in bringing this up, and hence it's not being spoken as much as otherwise you would think that one would speak.
Ananya, that's one valid point. One is the reliability, in simple words, right? What's going to be the reliability of your system? And there are certain amount of legislations and tests and homologations are all available. It's not something that is totally bad. But what I'm worried about is for which class of the vehicle, how many variants you are going to handle, right? Because the axles would be different, right? The gearboxes would be different. So if you want to do certain thing, and you want to make it as an axle motor, so how many axle motor you would be able to make? That's going to be the biggest challenge, right? And that's what is the way that is going to create a lot of confusions, issues, inventories, and that might deteriorate the positive business results. That's something that you need to take care of. Beyond that, there is a market, and the question is like, if there is a certain amount of rust in the entire chassis, would you go for a retrofit or not? If everything is fine, then why someone should pull out the diesel engine and put a EV, right? There will be a lot more of questions than answers that need to be answered first.
Thank you for the questions. We will have to stop here because we've crossed our time. But yeah, we are moving into a stage where digital infrastructure is as good as public infrastructure, and it better be open and reliable. And hopefully our governance models will evolve as fast as technology does so that we can keep up with technology. I would like to thank all the panelists once again. Request all of you to join for a group photograph.
I will have my.